What I'm telling you today is just a little part of what's left in my memory. In the evening, I used to say to my inmates, another day has crushed, we're closer to freedom by one day. I was arrested together with my friend Anton in November for no reason. We were taken for investigation at the police's headquarters. Nothing special at first. They just wanted to know how I became friends with Anton. We were isolated in a cell with no outside communication. It was terribly cold outside and a very bad winter in general. In that cell with thick walls, there was a constant temperature, that of a humid basement. We were kept in the police's basement for a period of 6 months and interrogated there day and night. Seeing that they could get nothing out of us, they resorted to the following method. On a table in front of us, they displayed all kinds of firearms. They later photographed us and accused us of illegal possession of firearms. We were trialed and given 15 years in prison. Not only our testimonies in court had been dismissed, but also what we had declared to the police under pressure and threat. Me and Anton, we were taken to our definitive cells together, in the same van. Right then, when we got off that van, we started feeling terrified. There was some whistling and shouting. With their eyes injected by this terrible heat, the guards looked as if they had just arrived from hell. We were put in room 4, the last room on our corridor, on the left-hand side in section 2 of the prison. In the room, another 30 people or so, all students. There was no furniture in the room, only mats on one side, and on the other side the mosaic floor was empty. One thing amazed me from the very beginning. The students there kept an extraordinary discipline, unbelievable. They were like machines programmed to do certain tasks, and they would execute those tasks to perfection. Something unclear was surrounding me from all sides. From outside, you could hear boots clamping. From afar you could hear thuds, just like when you hit a mattress with a stick. From above you could hear desperate screams, screams of pain. What's with these screams, I asked? Nothing. On the top floor we have the mentally ill and they have seizures. The incarceration regime did not seem that harsh at the beginning. But all of a sudden, conditions started to worsen very much. We had taken with us little objects, very valuable to us in there, like little medallions. One day, all these objects were crushed under the boot and smashed with a hammer. They were turned into dust instantly, and so were our hopes for a better tomorrow. They were turned into dust instantly, and so were our hopes for a better tomorrow. There were days when we would not be taken out for fresh air. Now, our physiological needs had to be done in a basin in the same room where we lived. The smell became absolutely horrible. Washing was permitted only once a week and under a cold shower. Food was being sieved first. The broth left needed to be absolutely clear. No beans, no potato pieces were allowed. Food portions were precisely measured. A food portion became really important in there. Hunger became quite tremendous. It was torturing us greatly, but we controlled it with all our strength, trying to do something else other than thinking or talking about food. Anton, why did you say that we're going to be released? That inmate, that law student there told me that either they release us or there's a war starting. Anton, how can you believe that? Why would they start a war? For who? For me? For you? For the few here in this prison? Can't you see? We've been sold. Whispers were going around that the prison was a great center for the destruction of students. They would be tortured here until their reflexes and mentalities would change. A terrible darkness was embracing me from all sides. Re-education. The first physical humiliation began with a body search by the guards. Clothes off! Hands up on the wall and feet wide apart. Open your eyes! Open your mouths! Roll back your foreskins! Crack your asses wide open! What are you hiding? There, in room 4, we were beginning re-education. Alongside beatings, some demented rituals or organized for the destruction of the victims. Us. If you say hell on earth, that's very little to describe what room 4 meant to the students. In this laboratory, they did all sorts of experiments with a precise aim. One morning, we had just drunk tea when one of the students, called Eugene, stood up in the middle of the room and said, "We have to understand that the future of humanity is a new system. Society feeds us bandits, free of charge. We are a bunch of lazy losers who, instead of keeping close to the heart of society, what do? What do? We grin and fight against our society. But this is the end of it. Teeth will be smashed
act whether you want it or not. No one gets out of here alive until they have denounced their own convictions and unmasked themselves. What do you think? Can anyone resist me? I am Eugene! I am the Alpha and the Omega. No one can take my place. I am the true gospel, and I'm writing that gospel now, and I've got the paper to write it on. It's your corpses. Attention! We have to extract the deepest secrets hidden in the creases of the brains of these bandits. At Eugene's signal, around 20 or so of the inmates took from under the mats sticks, planks, elastic cable parts, and started hitting the rest of us. I could not have imagined that some of the students there had already been tortured until the erasure of their reflexes of honor and transformed into ferocious beasts. Head, legs, face, it didn't matter whether the blows could be fatal. We quickly realized that the attack was controlled from above. Eugene organized his beating team in 2 rows, and we had to pass through its middle under a storm of blows. "Start systematic beating!" shouted Eugene. The procedure had a satanic precision. The one who would show the slightest sign of opposition would be struck to the ground and individually beaten, hit no matter where. During the beating, they started shrieking, and with repetitive moves, they circled us in a hellish noise. This method of being joyful and shrieking in the midst of torture had a demoralizing purpose. They brought a few buckets of cold water, poured it over us. We came to our senses. And then again they started beating for the same length of time. Again they brought a cold water, poured it over us, and they repeated the same procedure 3 times. After that, they took me to the basin to pee. My pee had a purple color and a terribly bad odor. The method aimed to change our conditional reflexes and replace them with new ones other than those acquired through education. The method was otherwise known as hypnosis through terror. Torture always lasted until the victim became from a believer a non-believer, from a tortured a torturer. In the afternoon of that day, it was a Monday, I can remember that. Eugene ordered us all naked, all those considered bandits. We were then forced to crawl in a circle and lick the bottom of the one in front of us. Eugene stood in the middle, holding a thick stick, and he would hit really hard the ones that did not obey his orders correctly. This was called le manège. The re-educated were watching from the sides, clapping, shouting, laughing. As bandits were then sent into a corner of the room, which Eugene called the sty. We were being treated like pigs, because for them, we were not being completely honest and correct. We were ordered to talk like pigs. Oink, 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 oink.
Eugene pointed at Anton and me, shouting, You haven't broken with your creeds yet. You haven't left behind your old convictions. But we are firmly decided to finish off with your banditism. Then another one shouted, Get the boys! Eugene, BTC, a gang got organized in two groups, and one group was tackling me, and the other one, Anton. In a few seconds, we were crucified facing the floor. One was holding one of my arms, another was holding the other arm. One was riding on my back, and another one had his bottom on my head. And they took out some sticks and started hitting us over our bottoms, thighs, and soles. This lasted for about 10-15 minutes. The first blow was so painful that I imagined myself being cut in half by an axe. Instead of the normal scream, I started laughing like a madman. Seeing that they were not going to stop, I relaxed my entire body as if I had died. He's dead! Stop now! One of them shouted. They took me and threw me into the sty. But I could still see and hear everything. Poor Anton. He was naked, his hands tied to the back, and in between his arms they had introduced the metal bar, and two of Eugene's robots lifted him up until he was left hanging in the most painful position possible. Then, with a stick as thick as my arm, they started hitting. Eugene was hitting over the face with ever-growing ferocity. Anton's cheek, his head, would be thrown to the right and then to the left. And I had the impression that his neck, fleshless by now, would break and that his head will roll off in the room somewhere. I fainted, but it didn't last long. Apart from the terrible pains in the places where I'd been hit, I felt quite healthy. They had brought my friend completely unconscious. He was thrown next to me into the sty. After no longer than a minute, I could feel Anton's body starting to stretch in spasms and trembling, hitting me harder with his elbow. And then he stopped breathing. I could feel how his body was gradually starting to cool. A guard opened the cell door. He's dead. What about the other one? He's unconscious down there. Take the dead one out. That's all I heard. My re-education. From time to time, Eugene came and spoke to me down there in the sty. Oi, friend!
going to kill you with my own hands. Of my own hands you are going to die. You bandit! Eugene was staring at me, but somehow I got such courage that I dominated him. I do what I want, and not what you want. What do you say to that, you bandit? Eugene was still staring at me. I kept looking at him, straight into his eyes, but not with contempt, nor with severity, nor revengefully. I was simply looking at him. Oh, you fucking bandit! Oh, he jumped at me like a snake, like lightning. One hand stuck into my throat, obstructing my breathing. And just when I was thinking, that's it, I'm going to die, and I could feel my eyes coming out of the orbits, he would leave me have a little bit of air, and then start pressing again. I kept on doing that until I lost consciousness. He left me to come to my senses. With all the terror of his beatings, Eugene was not able to induce in me the fear of him. He struck a slap so powerful on me that I went from mid-room right next to the door with my head in the feces basin. In the fall, my right shoulder dislocated, my right arm fractured. He then grabbed me with his left arm and punched me in the chest. I twisted on the floor in an awkward position, breaking all my ribs on the right-hand side. He then started hitting me, jumping on me and walking all over me. That was anyway useless. I had fainted from the pain. I woke up and in an instant I felt lifted by punches. Everyone was pulling me from everywhere. Head, nose, feet. Now my feet were up, the next second they were down. I was being pushed to the right and then to the left. I was being thrown like a ball, just like when excited kids kick the ball really passionately. Then they ordered me to open my mouth, and everyone in the room had to pass in front of me and spit into my mouth. It would have been impossible to keep my mouth shut. They would have forced it open with wooden chips. They would have broken the inside of my throat, my lips, my teeth. Then everyone in the room had to slap me. What a night. To be slapped so hard, so many times. Then they brought a tray full of feces, which was spreading the most horrific smell. The most terrible sickness grew in my entire body. They forced to open my mouth, and they stuffed feces in. I threw up everything inside me. Guts, stomach, liver, everything inside. When this operation ended, I was full of feces all over my body, my face, my mouth. They brought me pee to rinse my mouth with. Then they wrapped me in an old carpet and they took me as I was to the other cells to be shown as an example for those who would not want to reveal all their secrets. It was finally time for my broth, they said. A re-educated came in with a tin of salt, grabbed a handful, dissolved it into my broth and gave it to me to eat. I looked at my broth quite bravely, being sure that after eating it, I would have a kidney failure and die, getting rid of that never-ending nightmare. But my calculations had been wrong. I did not die. Instead, the most terrible thirst took hold of me, and the entire night I twisted on the floor in unspeakable pains. I was very frail by now. Every 2 steps, I had to pause
and sit down on the floor. Unmasking. When they considered that my moral and physical forces had been crushed, they started unmasking, which was the original scope of the experiment. Unmasking consisted of all you have declared to the police, plus testifying against anyone and everyone. Mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, colleagues, fellow students, neighbors, everyone. A re-educated played the role of the official investigator. This re-educated had once been a nice man, but following horrible tortures he had collapsed. He was now walking with a pile of files under his arm, thinking that he was this important officer. He wanted me to testify against other fellow students who had not yet been arrested. I noticed an interesting thing. I preferred being dealt with by Eugene and not by the other re-educated. I was dominating Eugene even though he subjected me to the most atrocious tortures. Testifying just when I was thinking, that's it, I'm going to die, and I could feel my eyes coming out of the orbits. He would leave me have a little bit of air, and then start pressing again. I kept on doing that until I lost consciousness. He left me to come to my senses. With all the terror of his beatings, Eugene was not able to induce in me the fear of him. He struck a slap so powerful on me that I went from his room right next to the door with my head in the feces basin. In the fall, my right shoulder dislocated, my right arm fractured. He then grabbed me with his left arm and punched me in the chest. I twisted on the floor in an awkward position, breaking all my ribs on the right hand side. He then started hitting me, jumping on me and walking all over me. That was anyway useless. I had fainted from the pain. I woke up and in an instant I felt lifted by punches. Everyone was pulling me from everywhere. Head, nose, feet. Now my feet were up, the next second they were down. I was being pushed to the right and then to the left. I was being thrown like a ball, just like when excited kids kick the ball really passionately. Then they ordered me to open my mouth, and everyone in the room had to pass in front of me and spit into my mouth. It would have been impossible to keep my mouth shut. They would have forced it open with wooden chips. They would have broken the inside of my throat, my lips, my teeth. Then everyone in the room had to slap me. What a night. To be slapped so hard, so many times. Then they brought a tray full of feces
which was spreading the most horrific smell, the most terrible sickness grew in my entire body. They forced open my mouth, and they stuffed feces in. I threw up everything inside me. Gut, stomach, liver, everything inside. When this operation ended, I was full of feces all over my body, my face, my mouth. They brought me pee to rinse my mouth with. Then they wrapped me in an old carpet and they took me as I was to the other cells to be shown as an example for those who would not want to reveal all their secrets. It was finally time for my broth, they said. A re-educated came in with a tin of salt, grabbed a handful, dissolved it into my broth and gave it to me to eat. I looked at my broth quite bravely, being sure that after eating it, I would have a kidney failure and die, getting rid of that never-ending nightmare. But my calculations had been wrong. I did not die. Instead, the most terrible thirst took hold of me, and the entire night I twisted on the floor in unspeakable pains. I was very frail by now. Every 2 steps, I had to pause and sit down on the floor. Unmasking. When they considered that my moral and physical forces had been crushed, they started unmasking, which was the original scope of the experiment. Unmasking consisted of all you have declared to the police, plus testifying against anyone and everyone. Mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, colleagues, fellow students, neighbors, everyone. A re-educated played the role of the official investigator. This re-educated had once been a nice man, but following horrible tortures he had collapsed. He was now walking with a pile of files under his arm, thinking that he was this important officer. He wanted me to testify against other fellow students who had not yet been arrested. I noticed an interesting thing. I preferred being dealt with by Eugene and not by the other re-educated. I was dominating Eugene even though he subjected me to the most atrocious tortures. Testifying started promptly. Seeing that I had nothing to say, they invented these wooden tongs made of wooden chips like those for cracking walnuts. With those tongs, they pressed my fingers and my toes, phalanx by phalanx. During this torture, I screamed my lungs out with pain. Come on, you bandit! Unmask yourself, shouted Eugene. It had occurred to me, finally, that I could lie. I started saying that my father had a lover who was having sex with a donkey, and my mother also had many lovers. And aroused by that, I had sex with my sister. And in the summertime in the countryside, I fucking God! You could see how these were invented at the height of despair. I was absolutely convinced that the world had fallen into the hands of these people. The principle of unmasking was this. After you had unmasked yourself, washing away what you used to be, you had to torture your other inmates and re-educate them. Oi, bandit! You either say what we tell you to say, or this is the end of the road for you, said Eugene. And I'll only say it, but do it. Tomorrow you'll beat that guy there. I'm not beating anyone, Mr. Eugene. That means that you're still a bandit. And we'll treat you as one. Aye, Eugene shook his head at me. They wanted us to feel dirty in all forms, to not be able to look anyone in the eyes with pride anymore. After not a long think, I said, no. No! No! No, Mr. Eugene. And God, it felt so good to keep my head up high. I was very frail by now, and I could hardly move. There, at the infirmary, I threw myself into a glass cabinet, breaking the glass. And as quickly as I could, I grabbed a hook-shaped shard and aimed for the throat. To cut it from behind, I was thinking, and so to die sooner. But because of the general confusion and the shape of the shard, perhaps, I missed the target. I hit lower instead, displacing a vertebra in the larynx. I did not feel any pain. I could see my blood shooting
shooting at about 2 meters away. I was gradually losing my strength. I was also losing my voice. I could hardly whisper by now. And with my last strength, I said to the educated, "My innocent blood to fall on your children's heads. I hope to God that happens." I still wonder where I got all that strength from. But let me tell you where I've been and what I saw after that. At a certain point, I flew up at an incredible speed. I wasn't aware of how I looked at the time. And I went through this place. I can't call it a tunnel because I didn't see it clearly, but it was very dark in any case, pitch dark. And then all of a sudden, it all lit up. And I saw this limitless area of a color blue, very hard to describe. It was there that I could see myself. I was this tall, 50, 60 centimeters. I had head, hands, feet, but only their contours, which were blue as well. And I was stopped in the back of a crowd of billions and billions and billions like me. And we were not going upwards anymore. We were going forwards. But not of our own will, no. We were being led forwards. There was such a silence, such a serenity. It's very, very hard to describe. The silence of a grave. I haven't been in a grave myself, so I don't know how it feels. But I can certainly say it was absolute silence. And we were moving forward. Just like this. Like dragonflies. At a certain point, we were stopped and separated in 2 groups. And in the middle there was something like a road, but coming diagonally from right to left, and very, very, very leanly inclined. I could hear and see everything, but no one was saying a thing. And the only very soft rustle that I heard, but rustle like this. One just like us. He had the same shape, same length, everything, but he was red like blood. One of those passed on that road at an incredible speed. Then another one. Then another one. 5 altogether. We waited for a while. And then another 5 passed. But black as tar on that road at an incredible speed. And then again we got reunited and started walking forwards. Like this. Like dragonflies. But all of a sudden, I felt like I was being pulled back. Behind me, thousands and thousands more had been added since I had arrived. But I was being led through amongst them without touching a single one of them. I got a little frightened. Where was I going? Why? I liked it there. It was beautiful, serene, and that blue light. And when I started to fall through that pitch dark area, that's where I got really, really terrified. And in my mind I was saying, God, why did you have to take me from here? I am not dead.